Well, you've had some interesting thoughts when it comes to racism. You're anti-affirmative action.
Yes.
You did an interview with Ann Coulter, which she said that she wouldn't vote for you because you're Indian.
You are an Indian, is exactly what you said, because you're an Indian.
Because you're an Indian, right. You've also had some comments, after the Jacksonville shooting, where and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but people kind of paraphrased it as you denying that racism still exists. Can you kind of expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things you learn from running for U.S. president is everybody in the press is really eager to say what you said without actually letting people hear what you actually said. So that's actually kind of interesting and a fun.
Right.
It's why I love new media, by the way.
That's why, that's why I asked you to kind of.
Yeah, and that's why
yourself.
That's why I love the modern internet and formats like yours and long form podcasts, because I think that's necessary for a lot of people who know they've been force fed and lied to. Now, when asked about the word systemic racism, you're going to say, do you believe in systemic racism? I'll answer that question once somebody tells me what that actually means, right? Do you denounce white supremacy? I'll do it once somebody tells me what that actually means. I denounce invidious racism. I denounce invidious discrimination on the basis of race. But I think the right answer to stop discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race. I truly believe that. And I don't think that should be a groundbreaking or controversial idea, even though some have read that to be quite controversial. I do believe that, have I experienced racism? Yes, I have. But I've also stubbed my toe. But I don't think that we're better off for teaching generations of young people, Black Americans in particular, who have experienced more racism than I have, to say, oh, you're a victim and you can't achieve something in your life because of your skin color and you're oppressed and you live in a systemically racist country. I don't think that does anybody any service. And I think the irony and the sad irony of this is that in the name of correcting for that systemic racism, that in the name for correcting for anti-Black racism, we're adopting these new, you could think about it as a DEI regime, you could think about it as a quota system regime, an affirmative action regime, a race-conscious regime of policies and institutions that are not only racist in one sense of the word, they're anti-white and anti-Asian racist. And you hear about that a lot, and I agree with that. It is, by definition, discrimination on the basis of race against people who are Black or, people who are Asian or people who are white. That's the part that people talk about. But it is also, and I see this actively right now, it's sad. I see it in the country happening right now, fueling a new wave of anti-Black racism that would not have existed in the country were it not for these disastrous policies. Because there's no better way to foster animus, to foster hostility in somebody than to take something away from them on the basis of their skin color. And I think it's wrong in all directions. And so what was happening in the country is, you think about the burning embers of racism. They existed and burned like wildfire 160 years ago. But those final burning embers of racism in the year 2022, 2023, 2024, right as we're reaching what Martin Luther King called the promised land, the final burning embers of racism, the right move there, you know what it is to just let it burn itself out. Does it exist? Yeah, sure, it does exist somewhere, but let it burn itself out. It's like a muscle that should atrophy to irrelevance. And instead, what we've done is we've poured kerosene on those final burning embers of racism. It's like an immune system. The analogy I wrote a book called Nation of Victims that went into depth on this theme. It's like if you think about racism as a virus, right? The body has almost cleared itself of the virus, but the immune system becomes so hyperactive that it actually kills the organ and the body itself. That's what I see happening in this country, and it pains me. I've hired people who happen to be women of color, Black women in positions of authority, executive authority, senior positions from my campaign to companies that I've founded. Not because they were Black women, I could care less, but because I believe they happen to be the best person for the job they were hired to do. In some of the cases, they're among the highest paid people in their respective organizations. I have heard, and it pains me to hear, sort of jealous kind of banter of people say, oh, she only got that job because of her race. Who was actually somebody else who couldn't cut it, who didn't get that job because they just weren't as good at the job. And I don't think that does anybody a favor. I think it's a disservice to the person who's in that position. I think it's a disservice to our country. I think it's a disservice to our national unity. And so, today when I say these things, they're actually less controversial than when I was saying these things back in June of 2020, a month after George Floyd died. That's where it was actually hot and controversial. Today, the things I'm saying right now, I mean, they might rub some people the wrong way, but they're not really controversial. I think most people have grown tired of, I think, DEI overexpansiveness. Some of the other things I say today on other topics are far more controversial than what I'm telling you right now. But I've always believed that, and I stand by it. I think that that's how we're actually going to get our country back, is by moving beyond race-conscious obsession. And same goes for gender-conscious obsession. And same goes for sexual orientation-conscious obsession. I think we're not going to save this country by celebrating our skin-deep genetic differences. I think it is going to be by reviving what unites us, actually. What are the values that unite us? And I think they still exist, but I think that's the debate for the country right now is, do those values still exist? And if they do, we have a country. And if they don't, we don't. And we're a bunch of different shaded melanin, two-legged higher mammals walking some geographic space that we call a country, doing what our iPhones tell us to do on a given day. That's what America looks like sometimes, but I believe America's more than that. And in many ways, that's why I ran for president.